Hi, and welcome to this AI and C# video on the Microsoft Agent Framework. Today we are not actually going to talk a lot about the framework itself, but more about the cost involved in using it together with the various LLMs. So, in essence, how expensive is it actually to do this? And it comes from various questions on the other videos about is this safe to do without me spending a lot of money. The short version is yes, it is safe, but let's go into it. Most important about all this is there is little to no hidden fees or idle fees on anything when it comes to AI. So, for example, if I went to one of my tutorials about, for example, Azure OpenAI, made my made my resource up in Azure, forgot it for a year, and came back to it, it would have cost me $0. So there's no fee like whenever it's running like a web app or another service like Cosmos DB or virtual machine, which costs money no matter if it's idle or if it's doing all the work. With AI, you just have your fee, your resource, and when you use it, it costs money. And if you don't, it doesn't cost any money. There's a small uh, disclaimer on that, but I will get that in the details about some storage cost. But before we talk prices, we need to understand tokens. So tokens is what an LLM speaks in, input tokens and output tokens. And it technically also have reasoning tokens, but those are output tokens. So you might not know really what a token is and how expensive it is to do, so I made two examples here. The first one is my Hello World sample, where I asked two questions to LLM. I normally ask, what is the capital of whatever country, and how to make soup. The reason I do that is what is the capital of, let's say, France, is a fairly low input token count and a fairly low output token count. And the how to make soup is a fairly low input token and a fairly long output token because it gives me the entire recipe, while how to make soup is a very short sentence. So if you went in and took my Hello World sample in any of the models, OpenAI, Gemini, Claude, and so on, and ran it 1,000 times, which is quite a lot. I would guess that throughout these videos I have made, I have had run it 50 times. So this is 1,000 times is a abnormal large amount of times to run these. But just so if you feel like it that could happen, you would see you would end up spending 52,000 input tokens and 375 output tokens. Remember these numbers because we will gonna see how much they cost. But there's a reason why I put it up in the thousands, because else it can be difficult to measure. Example 2 is a much more elaborate sample I made about some image requests and some fairly expensive PDFs, because the PDF was rather big with a lot of text, but also a lot of images in them. And if I ran that sample, it's a separate video, 1,000 times again, you would spend 34 million input tokens and 1 million output tokens. And this sample is a lot of input tokens because it's all the images. So the image in raw form is many input tokens, and especially the PDFs in input form is a lot of tokens as well. So here you see a more normal example, I would say, when it comes to dealing with files and extra data from other sources, where you end up spending more input tokens than output tokens. while the other one is the reverse. That's a kind of chatbot where someone asks a simple question and the LLM answers in a long fashion compared to how much input you have. So for 52,000 input tokens, 375 output tokens for some simple thing, and 34 million input tokens and 1 million output tokens for some more advanced things. And here is a little thing that will try and explain to you what there is, because some of them also have some upfront cost. This is from the 12th of October 2025, but you should always double check your prices. Normally they go down in price, but there's very, very many aspects of this. But let's go through it. So in terms of upfront cost, I mentioned there was no idle cost, but there's a few of them that have upfront cost. And that's because in OpenAI, Anthropic, XAI, and OpenRouter, which is the ones I have tried, you need to put in a credit card and fill up your account with some money. In this case, the minimum of all of them is $5 US dollars. And then you slowly spend those. So if you are afraid, then put in the $5 and then don't make it auto recharge when you reach zero. Then you're safe that you at max could have spent $5. Azure don't have any upfront cost because you just give it a credit card and you pay at the end of the month. Same for GitHub Models and Gemini and Hugging Face, you don't pay anything upfront. So if you want to get started with absolutely nothing, there's actually a few GitHub Models, and Hugging Face is probably the two that you can, for absolutely free, do anything. Gemini, you can do a little as well. The rest will have some cost. And the cost is again the tokens, and the usage is in 1 million tokens. So this amount of dollars per 1 million tokens. And that's the reason why I put in the times 1,000, because we can begin to actually find out the values. And of course, the different models have different costs. So a ChatGPT 5 versus a ChatGPT 5 mini have different costs. I have chosen not the most expensive across these providers, but also not the cheapest. So in this case, for Azure OpenAI, Azure AI Foundry, and OpenAI here, I have chosen to use the ChatGPT 5, which is a fairly expensive model in my mind. In real life, when I ran all the examples, I normally used ChatGPT 5 mini or ChatGPT 5 for 1 mini, meaning one of them is a thinking model and the other is not. But as you can see, for 1 million tokens, it costs 1.25. And output tokens are more expensive at 10. And you can see they follow the same price. And you can see Gemini also following the same price. There's lots of competition, and they try to go with the same. Two ones stand out. It is Anthropic Cloud, which takes more than double the price for input and a little more for output. And the same for XAI. So if you want to go with those two models, you need to evaluate whatever you want to see that they actually do a better job in your scenario, because they are much more expensive compared to the others. And again, if we went with a ChatGPT 5 Nano, this would be a 0.0 something value. So you can get it much more cheaply. But I'm just showing you here. If you went with the big model, the model you would end up with these prices. In terms of other costs, Azure OpenAI have none, and that's the reason why I primarily use it. Azure AI Foundry will have some storage because, as we saw in that video, it will store your conversations up in the cloud, and that is storage account. So that's normal Azure Blob storage, which is fairly cheap. So it's not like I couldn't measure it when I made the calculations. There's also various other services up there like web search and code interpretation and all these tools from ChatGPT. And they cost, of course, various things if you want to do X amount of web searches and so on. But by default, they are off. So when you run my samples, you need to get them on by default. OpenAI is the same, except that out of the box, when you just use it like I did it in the videos, there's no storage, persistent storage. You need to turn that on. And various of the others also have various other services like web searches and code interpretation and so on. Hugging Face is a bit different because it's not really a place where you should run all these. You have a subscription and it's more training data and such things. So don't really count this as, oh, I spent a lot, I can just get a subscription and that's it. But if we look at the prices then, if you went in with Azure OpenAI, ran my Hello World sample 1,000 times, you would end up paying 0.065 US dollars in input and 3.75 in output. And that's again ChatGPT 5. I have not spent this amount of money because I used the smaller models, because the bigger models is only when you actually need it. And for these small samples, it's absolutely overkill to use the big models. But again, it is a cost, but again, it's 1,000 times, which you probably won't do anyway. And you can see it becomes more expensive when we come to Anthropic and XAI, of course. It's a more heavy price, of course, if you ran the image and PDF sample 1,000 times. So like $42 and $10 in output. And now you begin to see that input suddenly becomes the big expenditure compared to chatbots, where it's the output that is the expenditure. So again, based on your user scenarios, you end up having a mix of these two. And that is actually it. So again, just going in, downloading my sample repo and running it a few times won't cost you anything, more or less. You need to put in your credit card and so on. There's the upfront cost if you want to go with the ones that need that. But it's not expensive to try this out in any way compared to other services and things. But of course, all of these have usage tools and billing tools and stuff. You can when you log in, and you can go in and see your actual usage fairly quickly. It's almost real time that they update it. So again, the takeaway from this is not expensive. This is something you need to try, and cost should not be a limiting factor in your test of all this. So with that, thank you for your time and see you in the next one.